Hello, this is Photography Gamer. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm reviewing Elden Ring for the Xbox Series S. The game is also available on PlayStation and Microsoft Windows. Elden Ring is a combat-driven action role-playing game developed by FromSoftware. The game takes place after the destruction of the Elden Ring in a place known as the Lands Between. The lands are governed by the offspring of Queen Marika the Eternal, with each one possessing a shard of the aforementioned ring. You assume the role of a Tarnished and are tasked with exploring the vast landscape in search of the Great Runes in order to become the Elden Lord. So what is it like to play? Well, before you enter the Lands Between, you have to create your own unique protagonist. Thankfully, this is one of the best creators I've seen, especially in regard to face sculpting. Given enough time, patience and reference material, you could easily recreate yourself to play through the game. Sadly, the same can't be said for the available haircuts, which are pretty limited. Once you're out in the open world, the controls are almost identical to the previous games by FromSoftware. You can wield weapons in either hand or fight two-handed. You have quick slots for items, potions, summoning spells, or various other powers. Combat is a deliberate and considered system where stamina plays a key role in success. Every action diminishes your stamina bar, with heavy weapons or armor further slowing you down. So fights are tactical and precise affairs where you've got to understand your foes, read their attacks and defend, parry or counter-attack as you see fit. One thing Elden Ring does remarkably well is the enemy variety, with almost infinite variations of foes all having their own unique problems to deal with. But be warned, enemies do substantial damage in Elden Ring, and 2 or 3 good licks will mean you'll be seeing the all too familiar "you died" screen. Thankfully, you can use jump, power attacks, and also stealth has been implemented, which gives you a chance to sneak attack your unaware adversary. So general enemies are fantastic, but the boss fights are the one thing FromSoftware are notorious for. Now, there were good boss fights, memorable boss fights, but I can't say that applied to the vast majority. A lot of them felt quite duplicated or lacking original patterns of attack or clever methods to defeat them. In particular, the core story bosses. Most of those lacked a sense of epic scale. Not all of them, they looked great. It was in an interesting location, for example, but it didn't quite have the variety that I was hoping. Thankfully, you've got quite a bewildering array of weapons to use in these challenging scenarios, from claymores, battle axes, staffs, spiked maces, and many more. But one issue is that once you start to invest in upgrading one of your weapons, most of the new ones you find aren't as effective, so you just end up using 1 or 2 weapons for the entirety of your playthrough. I went for a magic claymore, a large golden axe, and a barbed sword that dealt massive damage, but it was like swinging a tree trunk. So slow, but so effective. You can learn skills, sorceries, and use ashes of war to obtain additional special talents that can turn the tide in battle. It's this variety of weapons and special skills that really do make the combat fascinating, and it lets you create all manner of unique combinations that will suit your style. Okay, let's talk about the game world. Unlike the Dark Souls games, Elden Ring is an open world with an expansive environment to explore. At first, I would say it's a bit daunting, but exploration will reward you with experience, new items and progression that will help you in the long run. When you kill foes, they drop runes. Runes are a form of currency used to purchase items from traders. You can use it to upgrade magical items, or most importantly, you can use it to level up your character at sites of grace. Each level you go up, you have to spend more runes, and I would say as the game progresses, this rune acquisition does become a bit akin to a survival game grind. But back to the game world, it's full of stunning landscapes, surreal creatures, and some of the best architecture I've ever seen in a game. From 100-foot walking mausoleums to opera-singing hags, undead catacombs, epic castles, secrets, hidden paths, and treacherous lands full of overpowered enemies. The world feels alive as you'll often encounter enemy factions having pitched battles or random events that make you feel like you're living in a living, breathing environment. It really is a true adventure to explore these lands, and the open world does a lot of good to the overall feel of the game. However, it's not all good. Due to the scale, you'll encounter many side quests on your travels, but sadly the game has no real way of tracking them. No menu where you've got a brief list of ongoing missions, so you'll often encounter a character, have a chat, start a quest, then 3 hours later you've completely forgot what it was about, where you had to go, and it's kind of rendered redundant. It's a very basic mission, but one that really does have a negative impact on some of the best parts of the game, as the side quests, quite frankly, are a little bit more interesting than a lot of the core narrative. You've also now got a horse to help you get around, and this is really useful, especially in big open worlds, but also in some of the more epic boss fights, like when you're encountering dragons. Previous FromSoftware games, you now have a map, but it's like an old world scroll that you can add markers to and uncover as you progress. But again, the castles, caves and dungeons are without maps, so they become these treacherous adventures into the unknown. It's these sections that really balance off well with the open world. And for anyone who played Dark Souls, think of Elden Ring like Dark Souls if you chopped up all the castles and spread them out in a larger open world with a multitude of interesting places to explore in between. Crafting is also heavily featured and can be a very useful tool, as the items in Elden Ring do make a difference, like alleviating poison, stopping magical damage or enchanting your sword. All items have a practical use, and when used correctly they really do help with the overall challenge. And that is something that needs pointing out to new players. This is a tough game, combat's brutal, death is frequent, and you will get frustrated at some point with the obtuseness of it all. The game was made in collaboration with fantasy novelist George R.R. Martin, who provided material for the game's setting, and I would say this edition does help a lot with the writing side of the game. The NPCs are a lot more coherent and interesting than in previous games. They're still a bit vague and surreal, but the story did feel more fleshed out, and if you have the patience to dig into it, it's quite fascinating.
A path that a tarnished must travel.
Are you here in the lands between to take up the fight? Does your faith in the guidance of grace hold firm?
One thing I do think the game lacks though is more options to explore the lore and backstory, such as finding scrolls or books that would really flesh out all of the history, because it is a fascinating land. The game also features multiplayer, but you can also opt out and play offline. Online means you'll often get invaded by other players or allow other players to join you if you're stuck on a tough boss. Personally, I prefer solo, but the option is there. But again, the system is not exactly user-friendly. It's slightly improved on the Dark Souls series, but again, it feels like the developers don't really want multiplayer, they're just begrudgingly adding it. In terms of graphics, the game world, characters and armour look good on the whole, but there are some issues with the day-night cycle and weather effects. Like it goes from one to the other in about half a second, and it can be quite jarring. The architecture, as I said, is stunning, and I'd say visually it's a solid production. I can't say it's revolutionary or it pushes the boat out. It's very much a play it safe type of game in terms of its graphics. Doesn't push the hardware really. There are collision detection issues with invisible borders around objects in the environment, and in that regard it does feel quite dated. In terms of sound, the musical scoring is beautiful with fantastic and delicate tracks accompanying your exploration. The voice acting is good, but it is maybe a little bit laboured in its delivery, and the lip syncing, well, you know, the less said about that the better.
I'll ask Master Hugh to teach me. Certainly he does appear intimidating and holds no love for us tarnished.
Okay, what's good and what's bad? So the good points: the game is a true epic in scale, size and detail. The combat, although difficult, is intense and satisfying. The weapon variety is incredible. The character creator is very good indeed, as is the variety of creatures and monsters that you encounter. The writing has improved, as has most of the voice acting. The subtle open world musical score is wonderful, and it is really good value for money. Bad points: quite a few boss fights felt recycled and reused. The graphics, although pleasant, don't really push the boundaries. Collision detection is outdated. The omission of a side quest tracker is a rookie mistake. There are no loadout presets, resulting in lots of inventory management. and the balancing of the combat is a bit off, with very overpowered magic for example. So what's the verdict? Elden Ring is a quality adventure with an immense amount of depth, content and hidden mysteries to solve. Many of the new features add to the experience, such as the open world elements, but I would say it does suffer from the same bloated feeling of other similar games in the genre. Once you've explored for a certain time, you'll head on to the main quest, but it doesn't quite live up to the expectations, and I think more could have been done to make the core path more interesting. It's a very ambitious game, a very challenging game, and a game that's great value for money, but it isn't perfect. Even a die-hard fan can't say this game is flawless. Yes, it's very good, but I do feel a lot of reviews I've seen have conveniently ignored the game's issues and problems. It does breathe new life into the genre, it adds new features, it improves various elements, but it's still riddled with a lot of outdated practices that FromSoftware seem reluctant to let go of. But on the whole, it was something I really enjoyed. It makes you think, it challenges you to find a solution using new weapons, armor or items, and for that it should be applauded. To sum up what Elden Ring is like as an experience, there was a point in the game where I saw this large castle in the distance. I got on my horse, rode to the gate, had to deal with a giant guardian, then I entered. Upon entering, I encountered rival factions fighting for control as I explored one narrow corridor at a time. I stumbled on new items, had intense battles, used stealth to avoid certain death, and I just tried to stay alive until the next checkpoint. It's that mystery, adventure and tension that makes Elden Ring stand out from a lot of other games. It has its flaws, but it definitely deserves its place at the top table. Would I recommend it? Well, if you didn't like Dark Souls, then no, I wouldn't recommend it because, it's pretty much similar principles. But for fans of the series or gamers with an open mind, it's absolutely worth investing in. But be warned, it is very challenging, not particularly user-friendly, and retains a lot of dated game structures that some people might scoff at. So my score for Elden Ring is 9 out of 10. Okay, that was the review. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. This is Photography Gamer, signing off. Thank you.